Hi, welcome back to Trading Edge 360. We will now have Steve Ruffley uh, tell us about how to interpret news and data. Thanks, Steve, for taking the time to do this. Please take it away.
Hi V, can you see my screen?
Yes, all good.
So you can
See,
see the slideshow, yep.
no slideshow, just your face.
Oh, just my beautiful face. Okay.
Yeah, I was about to say that too.
Ah, well.
Yeah,
Uh, Second. There we go. Okay, that should be on the screen now.
no, say still the same beautiful face.
Okay, 1 second. There it is. Okay, do we have my
Yeah,
slideshow now?
yep,
Okay.
and an even more beautiful face now. Okay, please
Okay, well
go ahead.
that's 10 years ago, mate. That's 10 years ago. A bit of
Okay,
Photoshop.
all right, all
All
right.
right, guys. Right, I'm just gonna crack on because it's evening time for me, and I need to have my tea. So I'm Steve Ruffley. I've been trading for 20 years, not quite as long as V has, but yes, I've made a lot of money from news and trading news. Six figures in hours. So yeah, everyone wants to be like me. You got to put the work in, don't you? You got to be able to do it when it counts. I don't have all the answers. Okay, that's the important thing to remember here, right? But I do have a lot of questions. So I ask a lot of questions of myself, of the world. As V rightly pointed out when he did my introduction earlier on, there's a deluge of information. Okay. Now, what is information for? Information is power. So you have to understand where it comes from, why it comes from. So I'm trying to keep it light-hearted and not dive down any crazy rabbit holes. But at the end of the day, when you're a trader, you have to be able to understand where information comes from and how you benefit from it, and then also where the news comes from. So interesting. I don't know. At the end of the day, I back myself. I trade what I believe to be true, and that's all of us that we can do with traders. Everyone's looking for some perfect situation, some perfect setup, someone to tell them what to do, and that isn't trading. And after 20 years, that's where I am. So I'm going to talk about news and narrative in trading. So think about this: we all get up in the morning, don't we? What's the first thing we do? Yeah, we get on the phone and we look at some news. So why do we do that? Because that's human nature. And we're all curious about, what's happening in the world, what's keeping us informed of current events, validating, what maybe we think, what we know, what we don't know. Maybe news is, to a certain extent, entertainment. The way I look at it, and wrote a few things about this in my latest book, that it's almost like we've got some global Stockholm syndrome about news. Well, we can't step away from the news. And I guess, if you look at it for the bigger picture, it's maybe a form of control by whoever they are, or our own control of what we think we understand or want to understand. At the end of the day, there's a lot of news out there, and you can get it from various sources. And what you got to do with it, you know, news is a tool. So, what are you going to do with it as a trader? You got to think about just the general news, the mainstream media. Is it there to help us? Is it there to control us? I don't know. You tell me. As I say, I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to ask the difficult questions other people may not be able to. So again, what is it? There's the element of information in news. Okay, so there's a big difference between reporting facts. The information is information. Okay, information is facts. So when does facts become an element of narrative? So who is pushing the facts? Who puts the facts in their favor? Well, everyone does, because we all have an opinions. We all look back at our histories, who we are as people, and we all like to say events happened, to kind of suit our own agenda, our own fragility as human beings. So some things good happened, you're saying it a certain way, some things bad happened. Human beings are actually pretty easy to predict. it's a lot of things I go back to when I'm trying to kind of figure out the world, the markets, is the theory of big numbers. So, if you have enough information about enough people, it's quite easy to predict what the herd will do. It's very much, I guess, like casinos do. You can't necessarily understand or predict what one big whale will do. But, if you have enough people coming through your door placing similar bets, the odds are going to be in your favor. And I don't think it's any different, with news and information. And this is the kind of world we're moving into now, where information, data is power. All this AI stuff. What do you think? It's all there to kind of, so everyone can create clever memes and click on a photo that turns into a video. Really think about that? AI's for that? Don't need that. Information is power, and that is where we're heading. No one can deny that. I don't think. So I guess what we're trying to figure out as human beings, as a race, is what the blurred line is. We're starting to lose the ability, I think, to distinguish between what is fact, what is fake, what is real news, what is fake news. Every time we make something part of the conversation, they've already won. When I say they, I just mean, kind of people that, are the news. A very small select number of people have been able to own the news for a long time. It's nothing new. So, do you really know what is fact? How it's presented? What spin is it? No, I mean, I'm just asking questions here. I'm not trying to tell you or force anything down your throats. What I'm trying to say is, what do you believe and why do you believe it and why does it matter? So again, AI, it's the buzzword. All the things we're talking about is things that seem to be science fiction. So is AI going to save us? Well, on one hand, you've got someone like Elon Musk who's got 10, 11 kids, whatever he's got, saying, we need to have more kids, but then he's trying to populate Mars. That's just a broad example of something that, who's really kind of, what's fact? What's it all about? Do we want to populate another planet because, Earth is going to be uninhabitable, or do we need to make more babies, to make Earth more inhabitable? It's a tangent, and it's out there. And this is an example of news, things that people have said, so it's not necessarily about trading just yet. Get to the trading stuff. It's about understanding, why people have such huge amounts of control and what is the agenda, if there's any. Maybe there's no agenda. Maybe the world's just ticking along as it should be, and everyone's having a great time. But are we? No, really. No, again, think about it. Narrative is a very powerful thing that people don't understand. Narrative can be something as simple as the boring things I used to listen to as a trader on the floor. John Claude Trichet talking about price stability. Things like forward guidance. No forward guidance. Where's that gone? We don't have any guidance at all. We've got Trump talking about stopping data being released. The Bureau of Labor Statistics revising down job data. These are things that economists, traders, held in very high regard, and now what? They're no longer useful or they're no longer needed. How does that work? These are things I've written in books. I'm not afraid to say, what I say. And, it's not like some conspiracy thing. I've been doing this a long time. The way I've had to interpret data and interpret narrative and understand, why markets move has changed dramatically over 10 years. I guess in the first book, I talked about it being 50-50 technical analysis and, kind of news and data. I see it more 80% news and data. I don't think the data really kind of necessarily is a massive part of that. It's news and narrative that drives, how the markets are moving right now. Stock markets are record highs, gold record high, Bitcoin record high. That's what they're telling us. Everything's great out there. The economy is amazing in America, but the stock market's not the economy, and it's not the economy for most people. So why is that? Again, you got to think. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything's bad. For me personally, I don't care. I've made my money. I'm fine. Like it doesn't necessarily mean to me day to day, what the price of petrol or what a steak costs. Like, doesn't matter. But do I want everyone else to live in a world where it does matter? I don't know. That's a difficult thing. What's real? Yeah, what's real? What's really happening? What's really happening in the markets? What's happening in the real world? I guess that's the distinguish. Something we all have to distinguish between because it's important. It's important because it's driven by something bigger and it's more important than just kind of data released on various platforms. So I thought this was interesting. So when you Google, I just Googled something because I'm old school. I don't use AI particularly. Um, so when you talk about it, where do we get the news from? Well, I just tapped it into Google. Well, I knew anyway because I'm 45. I'm old school, so we get it from online platforms, television, newspapers, radio. We all know where we get the news from. But it's funny, isn't it, that this, they've highlighted in red, those social media. So we're getting a lot of our news from social media, especially young people are getting the news from social media, especially financial news. And it says, but users should be aware of potential misinformation. So what? You don't get misinformation from a newspaper or television. See, not my words, that's a pure copy and paste from Google AI. Interesting though, isn't it? Interesting. Think about how we've socially engineered people and how people have trusted in the system and trusted in things. Okay. Trading's all about making money. Okay. That's what trading's all about ultimately. It's about making money. So if you control a big source of how people make their decisions, whether small, whether big, going back to that theory of big numbers, maybe, you then get an edge. As I say, can't prove any of this. I'm not putting my tinfoil hat on. I'm just trying to let you understand and have a bit of insight into the way I kind of think and see things progressing and moving. I can make money from trading news and have made a lot of money, but it doesn't necessarily mean you will. Um, and that's the difficult thing about, kind of trading in general. Everyone wants a system. Everyone wants them, to kind of have something that's a high probability and edge. Well, a lot of the money that's made is the edge that people don't even know about. Doing things and trading markets, you know, with your own ideas, with your own commitment. And people don't want to do that because it's scary. And if you get it wrong, you can only blame yourself. So, when you do trust in your own kind of instincts and your own understanding of the world becomes a very lonely place. And trading's a lonely place for most traders, to be honest. Because, there's a lot of magical potential upside, but very few of us get there. And, listen, I'm not saying I'm the best trader in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been in it long enough to know, that I'm still here and I'm still doing it. Um, so what you have to understand about you as a trader is, you can discount all news if you want and be a total technical trader with your 1-2% risk reward. But is that going to make you the amount of money that's going to, see you through your trading career? I ain't never met a trader that's done that. No, a retail trader anyway. As V will say, like you get paid a lot of money to be an investment banker. The difference is I do it with my own money. So I don't have the luxury of kind of sitting on my hands and waiting for the market to come to me. I do have to do that because, discipline's very important. When the opportunities present themselves for me, I'm gonna make some money. I got bills to pay like everybody else. So it's interesting, isn't it? The whole Twitter thing, who owns the news. So, a lot of us will get our news from Twitter. And I still call it Twitter. I make no apologies. I've done a nice little. This is my PowerPoint skills. Beautiful. The X logo and Elon. The best I could do. I don't have a team of people to do this stuff, so it is what it is. So we get a lot of that news, for Twitter X. But think about it, how we changed. I've been on Twitter for a long time, 2013, I think. So the For You tab. Well, who decides what's for me? Who's Elon to decide what I see when I see it? Okay, I don't choose that. That's given. That's presented. That's part of a package. It's not even free anymore. I have to pay for my blue tick. just to be told what I need to see and when I need to see it. Okay, well, that's just the way it is, you know. Then we have things like, Facebook, a lot of people use, you got your promoted, your feed, etc., etc. Then we have, your news apps like the BBC, etc. So what, what, who and what decides what you see and when? It's not like you go to a shop anymore to read the paper, which is yesterday's news. It's printed media. You get instant updates of what is being told in the world. And again, like be it facts, you can believe it's all facts. You believe it's facts with a bit of spin, believe it's facts with some narrative, but you're not really in control of what you see anymore. That's what I think. Worth thinking about, isn't it? Because you don't ask yourself these questions, then you're definitely not ready to be a trader. Because trading will test you in any which way it can. And if you're relying on non-farm payroll, CPI, PPI, anything like that to make your trading decisions on, well, that's your call, that's your decision. But it's worth thinking about how these things are presented to you. That's just common sense. And so the news and narrative, it goes through all these various kind of incarnations. So news is just news. So a lot of things happening in the world right now. Are we in World War III? Are we not? I don't know. How many more countries would have to be involved in World War III for it to be free? Trump and his tariffs. Is that good or bad for you? Do you know? Do you care? What's happening in the world will shape the way it is, and it will make you form decisions whether you accept that or not. Um, that's just how it is. Life choices, to a certain degree are driven by, human beings, our nature to act upon things, that make us think in a certain way. So, well, that's just, I guess, like an overview, an idea of how I see the news in general. So, when it comes to financial news and trading, is it really that different now? I mean, maybe you don't know. I've done this stuff for a long time, a long, long time. I've read a lot of news. I've acted and traded upon a lot of news. I've written books about news. I've written books about my trading experience and what I've done. So maybe this is new to you. Maybe it isn't. All I'm doing is getting you to think about things. Okay, thinking's hard. Thinking's difficult. Thinking's boring. People just want to be told what to do. But if you want to be a trader, you have to know what you want to do. You have to know inside what you believe and do something with it. So yeah, on my days in the floor, I paid tens of thousands a year to get, Reuters feeds, Bloomberg feed, Squawk feed. I had every bit of information, available. I was on the guy with the 8 screens, the guy on the floor, did all that stuff. And yeah, paid a lot of money for the news. But as I say, we generally get the news from the same place now. It's not that the news is less valuable or more trustworthy or less trustworthy. It's just more readily available, maybe by design. And that's why I say, you can get things on Twitter now probably just as quick as you can on Bloomberg. You've got free apps like FX Street, some guys that I've worked with for years and years and years. They have a news app that's very good. You can all buy a Squawk feed to have that information pumped through. I've known guys doing the Squawk feeds for years. People like Harry Daniels, a live Squawk. I'm going to interview the founder of X Street actually next week on one of my kind of podcasts. So information is readily available for everybody, and for the main part now, it's free. But is free always good? Okay, so I didn't need to pay for Reuters, Bloomberg's, that kind of stuff anymore because not because I didn't need the fastest information. It didn't really matter what the information was anymore to me. All I did is trade what I know. I traded the markets. I didn't trade necessarily data or narrative or what someone told me they think, Bitcoin to the moon, or the last guy that was on, I don't think, like Bitcoin would break 100,000. I don't care. I'm not interested what anyone else's opinion is. They don't care. They're irrelevant to me. Everyone is irrelevant in what they think, what they do. I have my screens, I have my account, I have my mouse. I trade what I think, what I know, what I believe. And that's the difference, because if you can't get to that point where you trust nothing but yourself, you'll never trust yourself to be able to do the 100, 200, 1,000 lot trades that I do. You know, you have to believe in what you're doing. And even if you lose, at least it's on your terms. So it's interesting, I think. Worth having that conversation. So again, is free better? I don't know. You tell me. In the end of the day, we can all pay for a better service, better information, faster information. Is it any different? I just don't believe it. I don't believe anymore that the information being given is any better than it was. And I don't think just because you pay more for it, that really it's required. So as I say, it really goes back to who owns and who delivers the news you read. Um, I don't think there's any difference, yeah. And you might read some articles that are written by, paid journalists that are better. I've written for the Bloomberg, Financial Times, Reuters. Am I smarter than a professional journalist? I make more money. Does it make me better? No, that's not my job. I like most things. I just dip in and out, to things like this conference today. I just dip in because V asked me to. I don't need to be here. Like I've made my money. I've done what I've done in life. I'm just doing because I want to bring something to the table and help out people that I think are nice guys. So it important that you read a 3-page in-depth article on something financial. Will that give you the decisions to go, or the confidence to make a decision to go out there and do something? I don't know. What do you base your decisions on? As a very short-term trader, um, I have to be making decisions almost in real time. So I can be in trades for minutes, seconds. A very different mentality than investing. The investing, I think, is the narrative that everything's fine, everything's great, let's buy everything 'cause it's always going to go up. But for me as a short-term trader, I want to be involved in the noise, which I think a lot of people don't enjoy doing or like doing because it's very risky and there's no pat on the back. You don't wait for confirmations. You don't wait for a, doji candle and a close above the moving average, or you don't wait for a trend to be formed like an Elliott wave. What you have to do is be involved in the noise and the volatility and the liquidity, and that's where I get involved. And that's how I make my money. News isn't always a big part of it. Um, Again, as I've said, I don't have all the answers. I've made a lot of money from, big news events, but they're big news events that no one was expecting. So, things like unexpected, kind of rate hikes or, cuts and terrorist attacks. Yeah, terrible things. Well, me, I didn't do them. But yeah, a bit of news that surprised the market. I've been there and I've put the size on and I've done very well. So news is, as I say, it's a tool to be used, but it's also something that you have to, I guess, take with a pinch of salt. If you're basing all your trades on news and narrative, perceived narrative, then you've got to be careful because, just because an on-farm payroll comes out, better than expected by 100,000 doesn't mean it's not going to be revised, to lower, which we've seen, systematically. Again, I was writing these things, years back before that was even news. It's almost like they're lying in plain sight, but no one wants to care. I mean, look, it's the funny thing. Like when I first started on the floors years back, the rule was that all Chinese data is fake and just ignore it. Whatever the market does, it's going to do regardless. And I just feel like that's where we are now with most data. Um, doesn't matter. If it gets revised up, down, if it's truthful or not, what does it really matter? The world's going to continue. The government's going to do whatever it can to continue this idea that the stock market's the economy, and as long as that's going up, everything's fine. Well, what happens, when the wheels fall off? The US is 37 trillion in debt. You know, how long before that's unsustainable? They can kick the can down the road much longer than any of us can, kind of keep up with it. But at the end of the day, it's going to come knocking to us all at some point, isn't it? We have to pay the piper at some point. There's no way we can just keep racking, huge amounts of financial debt with no, with less tax revenue and less kind of younger people coming through the system to pay the aging population we've got. So, news and financial news. So, as I've said, what we see is news, but is it fact? What we see, is there a narrative behind it? Well, always, when someone writes something, it's an opinion. So, if news was just news, it would just be facts. This happened today. So, when you go into the market news of data, we've gone one step further. That not only are we saying that the data that the government presents, if the government doesn't like the data, they can then fire the person that creates the data. Or if they're not good at their job, will just stop presenting the data. And that's what's happening right now. So when you go back over the last 20 years, well, what was real? What wasn't? Just because we may be coming to an end game in data's usefulness or it isn't supporting the narrative of the current administration, then what happens when you don't have any information at all? So how would you judge the economy if there's no data? You tell me. How'd you do it? What, a GDP figure? So we don't have that anymore. We don't have job creation data anymore. We don't have inflation data anymore. No PPIs, no CPIs. So how would you gauge the state of the economy if there was no financial information whatsoever, ever? Well, how you feel? How you doing? Do you feel better off than you were this time last year? Do you feel richer? I don't know. Interesting. So I guess we start from the beginning. A lot of things, that I have to laugh at whatever. I'm kind of like, the narrative perspective and, this whole climate change thing, yeah, climate change, the weather. Yeah, it's going to change. Okay, war. Okay, whatever. The economy, price of cheese. You know what I mean? This little people stuff, like, I don't care. No, I don't get up in the morning and think, what's the weather doing? Like, is that going to affect my life? No, you get up, you take your kids to school, you get out there. Why is it so important that we have to be told that, sea level's going to rise? We're having more floods than ever. We're having this, that, and the other. Well, it relates to the more tax, doesn't it? We're all going to pay more money. Well, that's great to a certain point. If you think that more tax can save the world from the weather, that's fine. But is it news? Is it information? Or is it narrative? Don't matter if you like it or not. If you read news, you will have a bias. Maybe you don't know. I've trained myself to read news in a different way than most people. And I'll tell you right now, doesn't make you happy. Okay. I'm not saying just because I read the news and believe things that I believe and go through data that I believe and all the things I go through. It's not about a happiness thing. It's not about I think I'm smarter or better or it makes my life better. None of this stuff does. I'm just trying to say that you have to take everything that you listen to and that you base your decisions on, and put it to one side and think, well, what do I actually think? What's actually in my control? Why am I being told this? More importantly, why do I feel this, and what's going to make me do? Okay, so you can think about things like, is a stock good or bad? Currency. The dollar's weak. Okay, so what does that matter to you? Bitcoin, hodl. Okay, fiat's dead. Lost what 98% of its purchasing power in the last X years. That's it. Fine, whatever. I don't care. Is Bitcoin the answer? I don't know. I don't know. The people that created a whole financial system, Jekyll Island, and all that kind of stuff. What they're just going to give you the answer? Yeah, fiat's dead, and all the trillions that we made out of that. Just buy Bitcoin. So all you own Bitcoin, you'll be fine. Who's going to pay for everything else? Doesn't make sense. Okay? Nobody's telling you how to save yourself. Right? This is a difficult thing. You can hedge all you like in gold bars. You can hedge all you like in Bitcoin. But, if it comes down to, they just have to turn the power of the internet off for a month. What do you need? You're probably gonna need a gun more than you're gonna need, Bitcoin. What use is that then? Zero use. It's to grow your own food. Again, I'm just trying to throw things out there. I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm not trying to be, too out there. I'm just trying to say things, that we should all think about and, kind of relate it back when you think things on a huge, big scale. Then maybe trading is actually quite easy. You just think what you think and you press your mouse, buy or sell, but it has to be based on what you think, not what someone else tells you. Because let's face it, billionaires don't have your best interest at heart. Now, you don't know any billionaires. I do. They don't like us. We're entertainment. Okay? So I can tell you that from personal experience. No billionaires out there to come and save you. Now, I know the good billionaires. Well, yeah. How can I say this? I know the good and the bad billionaires. All right? That's it. So when you speak to these people, you're not even on their radar. They have no interest outside their 100-year plan, what they're going to do with their money. Okay? So think about that and who owns the news, the media, the corporations. It ain't me and you guys. Anyway, there we go. So I guess you think about it, what do people who present the news or the narrative have to gain? You know, think about our own mate, Elon Musk. He came out with that 420, funding secured. He got struck off, didn't he? He couldn't be the CEO of his own company for that. That was his only, his only kind of problem. He got fined a little bit. Yeah. So how much money did he make from that? Or the billionaire index, or a billionaire's lost a billionaire this week or this month, or lost whatever. You don't have any idea how much a billion is, do you? You really don't. Like, we've confused the world with this narrative that like a millionaire's rich. Millionaire's not rich. Millionaire's nothing. Billionaire, right? You can have a billion and lose 80-90% of your money. You're still going to live forever absolutely fine. So you got to think why news is so important, why narrative is so important, why the concentration of power at the top, not seeing structures and corporate ownership, but also how the news is presented and given to you, because someone somewhere is making money. You only have to make a little bit of a lot of people. Yeah. Still billions of us. You make a lot of money. So as I say, my job as me is to question everything. Your job as you is to question things as a trader. Okay? It really is your job. You have to take responsibility. If you're going to trade news, okay, you've got to take responsibility for what you base your decisions on. But also as a trader, you've got to take responsibility full stop. Okay? You can discount data, as I've said, and purely trade technical. That's on you. Something big happens, maybe, if you keep a tight stop, you're just going to get stopped out. But you won't make the big money like I've done because you're discounting the news. You'll either be right or stopped out. So it's actually just luck. So again, all we do is look at real trades, look at everything. What everyone else thinks, it doesn't matter. Like, that's not your responsibility. And as I said, you think a billionaire like Warren Buffett, for instance, is going to tell you what his next big stock pick is. He's not. He does it after the fact because he knows he's got a following. He's got a proven track record and he's successful. So people are going to follow him. So it adds into his momentum. So the reality of all these things is someone is always out there making money. And it's not necessarily the big money that you think. It's just the constant narrative, the constant everyone following a trend. And remember, you're always right in the trend, but that trend can change one day and you're either ready for it or you're not. This is what concerns me about the world, is that everyone is long everything. If you really think about it, between your home equity, your stock portfolio, your pension, everyone's long everything except the one generation that's got everything and is long the short time. So if there is a perfect time to crash the economy, stock market, which will be affect and will affect everything, What are you gonna do about it? It's interesting, isn't it? I'm just trying to make you think, not trying to push my agenda. I don't have anything to sell. You could buy one of my books, make a quid of a book. I don't care. I give it for free. Makes no odds to me. I'm just trying to open your eyes to the complexities of the market and to understand that, what you see isn't necessarily for your benefit. So again, I've talked about the data. Okay, so I've been doing this a long time. I could put screenshots down about the revisions, that kind of stuff. Your job as a trader is to get out there and look at the data and make your own mind up. I'm not going to sit here and put screenshots and tell you what you should think. You need to go and do it yourself. Yeah, if you want to be a real serious trader, do some research. Look at these things. So I've talked about the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the non-farm payrolls, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I did it. I wrote the news before it even happened. I published it in a book in writing 2 years ago, which a book that I started writing 5 years ago. So that's how long I know it's been going on. Do you? No. But if you're making decisions based upon it, maybe you need to think. So I guess, yeah, going back to the non-farm payrolls, how do we lose all these million jobs? It's funny how these things happen in election years. It's funny how people, governments come into power and say it's the last guy's fault. Ah, that's not my data. That's the last guy. Then it's the last guy before him. We're at this kind of point where we don't like this leader, we don't like that leader. Look at the UK. Like who could have thought Starmer would come in and basically destroy the economy or whatever he's doing. Maybe the economy's working for you. It doesn't matter because you just blame the last government. Well, they were in for 14 years, so we're trying to build from the ground up and fix it now, and it'll all be fixed in 4 years. Oh well, you've done such a bad job, you won't be there in 4 years. Oh, we'll just get reform in then. Because that's what rebranded Tories. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't really matter, does it? It's just a continuing cycle of this. So as a trader, and you want to make money from this stuff, you've got to understand where you are in the cycle. You got to understand the products you trade. You have to understand, what the impact of these things are short, medium, and long term. If you're an investor, then that's a long term thing. As a trader, I'm making decisions, based on minutes and hours. So I'm in and out. Is it always news dependent? No. Is the narrative, is the things back in my mind that I think? Maybe. Again, I'm not immune to this. I've learned and trained myself to be very questionable of things and understand what I believe and what makes me press the button with the big numbers. You have to be able to do the same for yourself because otherwise, you can get a big opportunity and you can miss it. And, at the end of the day, if you miss the opportunity, it's gone. It might not be there for 6, 12 months, years. I've been sat on the side of a gold trade, that was up, $100,000 in a couple of hours. You haven't done that. I've done that. Could I do it again? Maybe. I don't know, but I did it. I did when it counted. And that's the difference. I did it. I did it off my own thoughts. I did it off what I thought, and I did it. No, could I have made more money? Yeah, sure. Could I have lost money? Yeah, maybe. Well, I didn't. I made that money, and that was based upon my belief in me, my belief in what I read, and what I thought to be true from news, what I thought was going to be, a market reaction. So again, like I said, I could show you more. I could show you screenshots of the data, but I can't just give you the information. You have to find it yourself, and that's the hard truth. And that is the real hard truth about everything in trading. You've got to do it yourself. Do your own research. Find out what makes you tick. Find out what makes you press the button. Because no one's going to come to you, no matter what they say, with a system, a plan, a guaranteed system. Doesn't exist. Okay, I've been around long enough to know that. Are people that can help you? Yes, people can help you. But what's their gain? What do they get out of it? Think that too. So yes, pretty brutal, Steve. Sorry. Well, trading's hard. Sorry. If you want to make money from trading, the brutal truth, it's hard. It will push all your buttons and it will test you. My job is to make you think. Okay? Make you think about what you need to do, what you need to, know from your own perspective, how you, kind of get on board with news, how you get on board with data, how you get on board with technicals. You've got to think about everything because it's your responsibility. Okay? Your account, your P&L is your responsibility. And if you're not ready for that responsibility, give your money to an IFA. Let somebody invest it for you. If you can't make the tough calls, you will not make the big money. If you're not aware of all the things, and again, I've just focused on fundamentals completely in this presentation. I haven't touched on the technicals. But if you're too far one side of the camp, you're either going to keep your risk relatively small, but risk the big upside, or the other way around. Okay. So our job as traders, our job as people being involved with the markets is to figure out what we listen to, who we are, why we do things, but it has to be our decision, why we do it. News and narrative, I'd say, is a big part. So to wrap up, it's the end of my time. You have to live and die by the sword, I'm afraid. In trading, you can't be technical 100% all the time. I don't think without limiting the upside. And everyone's human. Even I'm, swayed by the narrative. Even me, I read things and it gives me a bias. And I've tried my very best as a scalper and short-term trader to be market neutral, where I can buy and sell products based upon all the information I have at the time. And it's very hard. It's not easy at all. And I'm not expecting it is to be easier for anyone else. Again, the end of the day, as I say, even if you dismiss everything I've said, like I just tried to tell you my opinion. I come here with no agenda. I'm just giving up, 40 minutes of my time just to say things and to think, make everyone think. We need to be thinking right now because the consolidation of power has never been this great, I don't think. And the consolidation of information has never been more powerful. And where we're going with AI, I truly don't know. I couldn't tell you. Is it going to help humanity? I don't know. Money, power, and control. What the world's all about, Scarface. First, get the money to get the power. At the end of the day, I have as much power as my money allows. And that's it. That's all I can do. That's all I can kind of control. But if you're an aspiring trader and a trader or whatever you are, you've got to think to yourself, what's your control? What have you got? What are you going to do? All right, guys. Well, as I say, I don't have anything to sell, so you can Google me. I'm about. Any questions? Anything anyone wants to ask?
Right, here's the time to ask some questions. We don't see any yet, but good point about narratives and fake news and all. This is the times that we live in. Sounds good. So thank you for your thoughts, Steve. Thank you for taking the time. We're going to take a break now. Thank you very much. Take care. We'll see
My
you again
pleasure.
in
Take it easy, mate.
7 minutes. All right. Cheers, mate. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.